What's shaking, everybody? My name is Ross Mandell. I'm coming to you guys live today from Scott Woolley Studios in Delray Beach, Florida. We got a guy on today who is very, very dear and special to me because he is a life and death guy. He is a board-certified cardiothoracic surgeon. He's performed over 3,000 cardiac procedures. Any of you that have a broken heart might want to consider calling Dr. Phillip Ovadia from my hometown. Doc, how are you today?
Great to be here with you, Ross. Really fun to discover that we're sort of brothers from another mother and
Crazy.
grew up literally around the block from each other. So awesome to be here with you and really excited to have a great conversation with you and your audience on what they need to do to stay off my operating table.
Now, I believe that's the name of your podcast. Is that correct?
My podcast, my book, that's and my mission in life, right? As you mentioned, I've been a heart surgeon for over 25 years, performed multiple thousands of heart surgeries, and I've just come to realize that no matter how good a surgeon I might be, no matter how good all the heart surgeons out there might be, people are always better off if they don't need the surgery in the first place than they will be after they have the surgery. So let's work on keeping people healthy so that they don't come to what really is an extreme situation of needing open heart surgery.
I mean, I just got to, it just begs the question. Why? Why are you so important? Why are so many people need heart surgeries? Why? My dad passed away in 1973, 48 years old. We came to learn that it was entirely preventable. He actually died in the hospital. Wasn't in
Yeah.
ICU. They didn't give him a baby aspirin. He had already had a heart attack, and they put him in a regular room. So why? It's one of the leading causes of death in America today. And why, Doc? Why is it so? Why do guys like you make so much money and get a chance to do 3,000 procedures? Why are we all so sick?
Yeah, that's really the question that we should be asking more. It doesn't get asked enough. Heart disease, like you said, number one killer in the United States, and it has been that way for over 70 years. We go back to the 1950s, actually 1948. The U.S. government declared war on heart disease. They realized that we were having this epidemic of heart disease, and everyone was asking, what to do about it. Now, what has happened along the way is we've focused on treating heart disease, right? And we've had some amazing technologic developments, right? The type of surgery that I do on a daily basis was unheard of, right? It was thought to be impossible to operate on the heart going back to the 1940s, 1950s. And, lots of innovative surgeons, cardiologists, right? They've developed these techniques that have allowed us to keep people with heart disease alive longer, right? We've had medications that have been developed to help people deal with the symptoms of heart disease. And I think unintentionally what happened is we got so good at treating and managing heart disease that we stopped asking the question that you asked. Why are so many people getting heart disease? And we really need to get back to that because no matter how good we get with the medications, with the technology, like I said, heart disease is still far and away the number one killer. Someone in this country dies of heart disease. Someone has a heart attack every 30 seconds. And that
Every 30 seconds.
every 30 seconds,
Oh, my
someone in this
God.
country has a heart attack, right? And for, 25, 30% of people, that heart attack is a fatal heart attack. They don't even get a chance to, take advantage of all this amazing technology. So that's really been the mission that I have been on recently. I've refocused my career in a lot of ways while I still continue to do surgery. I've really become passionate about keeping people off the operating table. And it is possible. We'll talk about it. But, I believe, and many others believe, that 90% of what I do as a heart surgeon is preventable. And I now view it as every patient that ends up on my operating table, it's a failure. And it's not that person's failure, it's the medical system has failed that person because there's really no reason that people should get to the point where they need open heart surgery anymore.
I was in a conversation recently with somebody very, very intelligent, also a leading edge guy when it comes to nutrition and the body, etc. And he said, there's no money in cures. There's no money in fixes. So, the entire food system. I'm going to go to Publix later, and I walk up and down the aisles, and it's basically stocked with poison, literally poison. But I'm talking about not one little section. The whole supermarket is essentially poison. They say you got to eat what comes from the ground. If God didn't create it, don't eat it. And it's not, we've been trained so differently. I grew up on eating Lucky Charms and Cheerios and all this kind of crap, this processed sugar, etc. And it's really just shocking to me. Now, I'm looking at you right now. You're a handsome guy. You actually look like the way a surgeon should look to me. But I understand that at one point I don't want to say you were overweight. They say you were fat. You were obese. You were unhealthy. And you were performing heart surgeries. So I find that unbelievable. So the question is, how many patients did you save while you yourself were like out of alignment with what you preach today?
Yeah, that number is way too high, unfortunately, because I spent much of my life, going back to, childhood, right? I was obese, overweight, and my parents, right, and I therefore were following the advice, right?
Right.
We were using the margarine instead of the butter. We only had skim milk. My older brother is actually a type 1 diabetic, so we did not have sugar in the house, right?
Oh my.
We had all the sugar substitutes, right? We drank the
Right.
diet soda instead of the regular soda, and like you said, we had the heart healthy Cheerios, for breakfast every
Can you
morning.
imagine that?
And
Heart healthy.
despite that, yeah, heart healthy, right? Right
What a
on the label
scam.
there.
What a scam.
And yep, definitely so. And I ended up obese. I ended up morbidly obese, pre-diabetic. And, I came to that realization, right, about 10 years ago. Active, busy, successful heart surgeon, but very unhealthy. And I realized that I was headed for my own operating table, so to speak. And I had that moment where I, kind of said to myself, like, how do I fix this? I don't know how to fix this, right? The advice that I had been trained to give people, right? Eat less, move more, follow the food pyramid, eat a low fat diet. It wasn't working for me. It obviously wasn't working for all the patients that were ending up on my operating table. And I said there has to be something more, right? And I was fortunate at that time to start to come across some different information. In a lot of ways, I realize now that I was open to receiving this information. This information had always been out there, but it's not what I was taught in medical school. It's not what, my colleagues were talking about at all the meetings that I would go to. And
Wow.
ultimately, I learned, like you said, eat real food. The answer isn't in all these processed foods, and most of what we're told of is food is actually not food. It's poison,
It's
like you
chemicals.
said.
Right.
And, just by changing the way that I ate primarily, changing some other things about my life, getting more activity, getting better sleep, all that stuff is important. But primarily, it's the food that we're eating that is driving this epidemic of heart disease and all the other chronic diseases that we're battling with. Another shocking statistic for you. I always talk about something called metabolic health, right? And what
Yeah.
this means is basically your body is able to work like it should, and it's able to take the inputs that you're giving it, the food that we eat, and do what you're supposed to do with it. And we measure metabolic health by looking at five basic measurements. And these measurements, everyone should know where they stand, but it's your waist circumference, it's your blood pressure, it's your HDL cholesterol, it's your triglyceride level, and it's your fasting blood glucose level, your blood sugar level, right? Now, by those five measures, what they saw when they looked at the data was that 88% of adults in the United States are not metabolically healthy. Only 12% of adults in the United States are metabolically healthy. And
Say that again. Say that one more time.
yeah, only 12% of the adults in the United States are metabolically healthy.
That's crazy.
Truly healthy. You're right. It's
That's
crazy.
crazy.
And that's what's driving the heart disease, the Alzheimer's disease, the diabetes, much of the cancer, right? All of these things that people end up, sick and dying from, it's all related to poor metabolic health, which all ties back to the food that we're eating. So this is what we need to start to focus on more if we're going to get ourselves out of this mess.
Again, I'm going to reference this gentleman I had here. I had two very, very, very smart guys on last week that are involved in the longevity world. A doctor who talks about the value of nitric oxide, your ability to produce that gas, and that, so he gave me some supplements that he recommends. I feel a difference after 2 days. Shocking. A lozenge I just put in my tongue every 12 hours, right? Over the counter. And then the other guy talks about metformin. Life-changing. I don't even know what it does. It just supposedly lowers your blood sugar. That people that take that living longer. Just one thing, metformin. So again, blood glucose level, like you say. Everybody in America is friggin' diabetic. What a business that is for Big Pharma.
Exactly.
You show me a pharmaceutical company, I'll show you a company worth tens of billions of dollars. So they don't want cures. It's the establishment we're fighting. It's a giant money grab. How tall a guy are you, Doc?
I am 5'7".
And what at your height? What did you weigh?
At my highest weight, I was about 280 pounds.
At 5'7".
At 5'7".
That's outrageous.
Morbidly obese, like I said.
Today, how's the weight?
Today, I keep myself between 170 and about 185. And
what? You lost 100 pounds?
Lost 100 pounds, and it's a lot more muscle today than it was back then.
Right. You would think the opposite, right? You lost 100 pounds and you're more muscular now. You look great. Exactly. I mean, you fill out that Thank shirt. You. So you're in the gym 3-4 days a week, I'm guessing.
Actually, not as much as most people would think, right? I actually use a resistance band training system that I can do at home, joints, right? Yeah, I'm all about efficiency. And so, it ends up being about 20 minutes 3 times a week. 3 to 4 times a week is what I do to maintain that. And then I just try and stay as active as possible, right? Walking as much as possible.
Right.
When I'm in the hospital, I'm always taking the stairs instead of the elevator, that type of stuff. And, it really does show you, right? It comes back to the food that we eat first and foremost. One of the sayings I love to repeat, right, is abs are made in the kitchen, not in the gym.
100%.
Right?
You can never out-train a bad diet. You can never out-train a bad diet.
Very
I used
true.
to go to the gym 5-6 days a week, an hour and a half, 5-6 days a week, and I still couldn't get abs because I had a bad diet. Now, you mentioned waist circumference. That's interesting. Because to me, personally, I know that when I have my waist, during periods of my life, my waist expands, I feel worse. Forget about what I look like, but I feel worse.
Yeah.
So that's a big tell.
Yeah, the reason that waist circumference is a better measurement than weight is waist circumference really gets at what we call the visceral fat,
Yeah,
right? This is the fat that's on the inside around your organs, and it drives you know, the disease, right?
I
That's
get it.
really
I
where
get
the
it.
disease comes from. And so by measuring your waist circumference, and what's beautiful about this, what I love about it is, you don't need anything fancy, right? You don't need your
Correct.
doctor. You take the simple tape measure, right? And you wrap it around your waist, and you can get a very good sense of how healthy you are. The guideline for a man is that should be less than 40 inches. For a woman, it should be less than 35 inches, is really the target there. And it, like I said, I just love it. It's a beautiful, simple measurement that people can do at home and people can see the progress, right?
Correct.
That is what tells you, whatever you're doing, right? Whatever your strategy is, it's a simple way of measuring, is it working or not? If that waist circumference is going down and like you said, you're feeling better as a result of that, it tells you that you're on the right
You
pathway.
don't need all this fancy stuff, right? Walking, they say, you walk 10,000 steps a day and you eat clean, you're going to be just fine. And that's crazy because, there's no money in selling that, right? You don't need my help walking. Maybe the sneaker industry will do okay. But, they can't sell you all this fancy equipment, etc. All these fancy programs. Walk 10,000 steps a day, uh, eat things that come from the ground, right? Vegetables, foods, meats, lean meats, right?
Uh,
Fats, everything Dr. Atkins said back in
yep.
the 80s and the 70s, right? I had the
Yeah.
privilege to know him. And I would go on the Atkins diet and people would yell at me, "Oh, you're killing yourself. You're going to give yourself a heart." I never felt so good. My blood pressure was down. My cholesterol was down, but I felt good. When you feel good. You don't really need a doctor to tell you. You know when you're healthy, generally speaking, and when you're unhealthy. When you're panting, when you can't walk, from climb a flight of steps, carry a child in Disneyland 25 feet, you're exhausted. You know what I'm saying. Generally speaking, you don't need all these magical, expensive things to get fit, stay fit, and to tell yourself if you're fit or not.
Yeah, quite true. Dr. Atkins was one of the pioneers, right? Whose work we all build upon. And honestly, you can go further back, right? And we
Yep.
we understood this, right? We can go back to science that was again being done in the 1940s and the 1950s, and it showed, sugar, highly processed carbohydrates. These were the problems. And unfortunately, that science, that message got hijacked, and the sugar industry undertook a campaign
Correct.
to shift the focus towards dietary fat, right? And so all of a sudden, dietary fat, dietary cholesterol, saturated fat, things like red meat that we had been eating for our entire existence as human beings suddenly became bad for our health. And
Right.
eggs were bad for our health, and butter was bad for our health. And the scientific evidence that was put forward for that was flawed science, in some cases, outright fraudulent science.
Crazy.
But the message caught on. The pharmaceutical and the food industry, jumped on the bandwagon. And here we are, 70 years later. And this is what I look at a high level. I can forgive, let's say, the mistake of thinking that that was the right path, right? There was some reason to believe that maybe that was true, right? And conceptually, it's a great concept. You eat cholesterol and dietary fat. We see cholesterol in these plaques that build up in
Correct.
the arteries and cause the heart attacks. So, logically, okay, this makes sense. But what I now look at is here we are 70 years later. We've been running this experiment and it has failed, right? Heart disease not only hasn't gotten better, it continues to get worse. People don't realize that there was a period of improvement from about 1980 to roughly around 2000 that heart disease deaths started to decline. And
Wow.
that was largely due to decrease in smoking rates. We did a good job at getting people to smoke less. But since 2000, the number of deaths from heart disease has actually been increasing again here in the United States, and we're now basically back at the highest, point in terms of number of deaths from heart disease. And like I said, we do a better job of keeping people with heart disease alive longer, but
Right.
they still ultimately end up dying of the heart disease. And that's because we have the wrong focus, right? The low fat diet, the pharmaceuticals to lower our cholesterol levels, these are not addressing the root cause problem, that metabolic health that I was talking about. And until we start to shift our focus and figure out how to address that, we're not going to make headway in this battle against heart disease.
Now, I hate to say it like this, but essentially you're a disruptor. What you're saying is still not common practice. The Surgeon General of the United States is recommending, a diet with what, 60% carbs? I mean, crazy. I mean, it's a scam. You're finding out that everything in America is built on a scam. I got to ask you this question. Is Big Pharma intentionally keeping people sick?
Yeah, at this point, I don't think it's intentional in the sense of, there's one or two people sitting in a room directing all this, right? I
Right.
look at more along the what we call institutional capture,
Well,
right?
they're pushing statins instead of metabolic health, let's just say.
Yes,
That's
exactly.
intentional because they're
That
selling
isn't
statins.
correct.
And it's coming out now that it's all bullshit.
It's a lot of, again, this science is very flawed. The studies that were originally done, leading to the approval of statins, they still are like, you can't get to the source data to
Right.
evaluate them, right?
Right. It's manufactured for sales. I mean, I hate to say it. That's all.
Very
It's
much so.
produced for profit.
And what started happening, what's so interesting to me is that, okay, again, we said maybe this will work, right? And so statins come on the market, and this overlaps with my career as a heart surgeon. When I graduated medical school, statins were just becoming the most widely used class of medications. And I go through my early training as a surgeon, and I had to decide, what area of surgery I wanted to specialize in. And I was fascinated by heart surgery, the physiology that goes into it, the technical, aspects of it. That's what I loved. And I went to my mentors and told them, I want to go into heart surgery. And they said, you're crazy. There's going to be nothing for you to do in 10
Oh my,
years.
are you kidding
Right?
me?
We have these medications, we have stents, heart disease is solved.
Right.
And being, I guess, maybe, the disruptor, right, that I
Yep.
am,
Yep.
as you said, I
Yep.
said, well, I'm going into heart surgery. That's what I love to do. And here we are 25 years later, not only has heart disease not gone away, heart surgeons are busier than ever. There's actually a shortage of heart surgeons in the United
What
States.
a shock.
There aren't enough heart surgeons
Yep.
to do all the surgery that needs to be done, which again tells you something. Why is there so much need for heart surgery? And so, I find myself coming back to that again and again. And I realize that our way out of this problem, right? We have a societal problem. You
Correct.
hear all the debates going on that we are literally bankrupting our country because of our healthcare expenses, and
Correct.
heart disease, diabetes, cancer, these metabolic diseases are the primary driver of that money that we need to spend. And our way out of it is not going to be more pharmaceuticals. It's not going to be more surgery. It's going to be addressing the root cause, right?
Well,
Changing
better
the food
decision
that we
making in the
eat.
supermarket. Better decision making when you go to the supermarket.
Yep,
Comes down
yep.
to that.
Yeah,
Better
and
decision
it's
making. More
like you said,
vegetables, more fruits.
it's a
Less.
very simple concept. Eat real food,
Right.
right?
What a
The things
shock.
that grow in the ground and the things that eat the things that grow
What a
underground.
shock.
The animals and the plants are what are going to get us back to better health.
Let me ask you a quick question. What does a good heart surgeon make today?
Most heart surgeons are making around $1 million a year, if not more.
Yeah. What? And there's a shortage.
Yep.
What does that tell you? It's crazy. So, you know, I've heard you call. I've done some research on you. I watched some of your stuff. You're excellent, by the way. You're obviously a brilliant leader in this field, and I thank God for men like you that are coming out now and are finally endorsing a simple truth that what is obvious. Grows in the ground, fruits, vegetables. God. God. Some people are offended because I use the word God. God gave us these things, right? Things that eat things that grow in the ground, right? Our animals, we've been eating meat since I guess since the existence of man and animals, right?
Yeah.
And I've heard you call cholesterol a scapegoat, and basically, I mean, you and smart guys like you were saying that the entire food and pharmaceutical industries have been lying to us all these years through media and government and all this, and it's still going on. They're still recommending nonsense. Heart healthy Cheerios. Do you know that for a period of time, I decided I wanted to be more healthy, and I'd go to the supermarket and I would look for the heart healthy label. It's a lie. I mean, it's nuts. I mean, so you acknowledge this, correct? Cholesterol's just a scapegoat. That was just something they like you said, it made sense, or they made it make sense. See, you eat cholesterol, and cholesterol's in your cholesterol laden foods, and cholesterol's in the plaque that makes up your arteries. Therefore, cholesterol equals bad, death,
Yeah.
disease.
Yeah, exactly. The analogy that I've borrowed and like to repeat is, if you're the looking down on the earth, right? You're an alien life form. You're looking down on the earth, and you notice, that these structures are on fire, right? And every time there's a structure, a house on fire, there's a fireman there, right?
Right.
And you say, oh, well, they must be causing the fires, right? And that's exactly what
Right.
happened with cholesterol. We saw these plaques that occur in the arteries, and there's cholesterol in the plaque, and we blamed the cholesterol for causing the plaque. But it turns out that cholesterol is our body's repair mechanism. The cholesterol
Interesting.
goes to the damaged wall of the artery to try and repair it. And what happens is, because we keep doing the damage, and what's doing the damage is things like high blood sugar, inflammation that results from poor metabolic health and what we call insulin resistance, right? The cholesterol is sent there to repair it.
I didn't know
And
this. This is brilliant. I didn't know this, and you would think I know this. And I've been donating money to the American Heart Association for the last 40 years. And
yeah,
at times big money. Sponsored the Heart Ball here in Boca Raton, Florida, at the hotel. So cholesterol is sent by the body to repair arteries because of high blood sugar and the bad things that we're doing.
yeah, smoking,
Cholesterol is a cure, like the body's mechanism for healing. I didn't know that. It's going to be a great clip.
yeah,
That's
exactly.
wild.
And because we keep damaging, right? You picture it like your wall, right? And you punch a hole in the wall and you put the spackle there and you repair the hole. But if you keep punching the hole in the wall, and eventually you have this spackle that's like sticking out of the wall, that's what we're dealing with in the
I got it.
arteries.
That's
So
crazy.
and you can say, okay, well, if you get rid of the cholesterol, right, it won't build up there, but that doesn't change the damage that's being done to the blood vessel. And ultimately, that damage being done to the blood vessel is what causes the problems. It's not the cholesterol that caused the problem. And so, again, we got to get to the root
The
of
cause.
why the blood vessel wall is getting damaged. And that's what leads us to inflammation, insulin resistance, and the foods that we're eating as the primary driver of this.
The American Heart Association, since my father's passing in 1973, became a cause for me, as I mentioned earlier. If you follow their guidelines today, the American Heart Association guidelines today, are you likely to end up on your operating table or not?
Very much so. And you know
What?
what?
I don't get it. Very much so. The American
Yeah.
Heart Association, if you follow their guidelines, you're going to end up getting heart surgery.
Yeah, because their guidelines promote low fat diets,
Oh,
right?
God.
And a low fat diet, by definition, right? They take the fat out and they have to put sugar in. And you have to
Carbohydrates is sugar. People don't know. Not
carbohydrates,
everybody knows
sugar,
that.
right?
I have this
And
argument all the time. Carbohydrates break down into sugar in the body, correct?
exactly. And even worse so, right? They combine it with these processed fats, right?
Oh,
The
God.
natural fats that, again, we evolved eating as human beings over millions of years, you know, the fat that's in animal products. We take that type of fat out. We put in this manufactured, you know, and these are the things
Chemicals.
like the vegetable oil, the canola
Chemicals.
oil,
Yeah.
you know, and our bodies can't handle those properly. And that combination is what's driving the metabolic disease. It's what's driving the heart disease. And then, you know, we put patients on these medications, right, to lower their cholesterol levels. And again, what we see, the data, you know, very clear. Half of the patients that come into a hospital with a heart attack have normal cholesterol levels that are within the guidelines is how it's you know, framed,
Wow.
and yet they're still ending up with the heart attack and on my operating table. And what the American Heart Association has done, you know, they look at that data and they say, well, obviously our guidelines aren't strict enough, right? We need to lower cholesterol levels even more.
Oh,
And
gosh.
again, over the past 20 years, we see the targets for cholesterol getting lower and lower.
Yep. I see
And
myself. Yep.
yep, and heart disease is not going away. And so it's time to step back, right? And it's time to say maybe, you know, the cholesterol isn't the problem to start with.
And it's crazy. I mean, I got to just say, so you've said that now, right here on this podcast, 88% of Americans are metabolically unhealthy. Okay. We're told that red meat and butter is garbage. Today, I'm not talking about 20, 30 years ago. Today, they still saying stay away from red meat, stay away from butter.
Yep.
Is government policy and associations like the American Heart Association, are they causing obesity?
They are, you know, and this is a pretty clear correlation, right? Since the first version of the U.S. dietary guidelines were released in 1980, our obesity rates have skyrocketed. So the very problem, right, that the food pyramid, you know, the food guidelines were designed to
Oh my
overcome
God.
has become worse. And, you know, again, it's this interesting discussion that goes on because you talk to the people behind the food pyramid, behind the food guidelines, and they say, well, people aren't following the advice and that's why it keeps getting worse. And yet you look at, again, the data on what we consume here in the United States, our consumption of red meat has gone down 40%. Our consumption of fat in general has gone down. And yet, you know, the problem is getting worse. So people do listen to the guidelines, right? You and I had a similar experience, right? We grew up,
Yep.
you know, get rid of the butter, take the margarine instead. You know, the base of the pyramid, right?
Yep.
Carbohydrates, bread, cereals, you know, grains, and it led to us to poor health, and it's what I see over and over again. And at this point, you know, the governmental policies and the related agencies like the American Heart Association are clearly making the problem worse. And that's something that we need to address. And it's something that I'm optimistic is finally getting addressed, right? We have this Make America Healthy Again movement. We
I
have
was going to ask you
Robert
about that.
Kennedy.
I was going to
Yep.
ask you about Robert Kennedy. the new administration.
Yeah.
Do you see this guy being able to change some of these things effectively?
It's a big battle, right?
It's a battle.
It's not gonna happen easily, but I know that he is driven to do it. We're already starting to see some changes happening, right? As we're recording this, we've had new guidelines related to food dyes, and we've had a couple of the big food companies saying they're going to get these out of the food
Right.
supply. Great start, doesn't go far enough, but it's something. We have some of the fast food, chains talking about switching the types of oils, right? Going back to cooking
Right.
with beef tallow, and getting rid of these vegetable and seed oils. These are all moves in the right direction. I'm very optimistic because of some of the people that have been put into leadership positions. They are speaking this same language. The new head of the FDA, Marty McCary, who happens to be a medical school classmate of mine, and I know that he shares a lot of these same views on the food that we eat. The nominee for Surgeon General currently, Casey Means, she also, very into metabolic health and talking about this stuff. So I am optimistic, but I also am cautious. And I tell people,
Yeah.
don't wait for the government to change this for you. You have the power, right? We all control what we eat. We control, what we buy when we're in the supermarket, like you
Exactly.
said. And that's how we start to change. I strongly advocate for people to take charge of their health. Don't wait for the government to do it for you.
Right.
Don't wait for your doctor to do this for you, right? You are in charge of your health and you can get yourself uh, out of, this mess that we're in.
So essentially, you do support, let's say, the Atkins diet, keto, carnivore
Yep,
type diets.
exactly.
One thing that Atkins posited that I know affected me greatly was food combining. Food combining. You have your meat with chicken, fish, with vegetables, but not with your carbohydrates. He's not. People say he's against carbohydrates, but he's against processed carbohydrates, not legitimate carbohydrates. Let's say that come from nature. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, so Dr. Atkins was right about the highly processed carbohydrates. And there's some nuance here where it depends where you're starting from. Because if you're already metabolically unhealthy, if you're what we call insulin resistant, any carbohydrates are going to be problematic. And
Correct.
so those people need to be on the very low carbohydrate type
Well,
approach.
that's why his initial diet, it's 14 days, basically strict,
Yep.
no carbs, really less than 20 grams of carbs.
Yeah.
And that's because he figures that he posited most people that come on his diet are insulin resistant. It takes 14 days for the body to sort of adapt to be able to process some carbohydrates. They
Yeah,
called it the
quite
induction period. The induction period.
exactly, quite true. Now, what I help people to understand, right, is that a diet like a carnivore diet, a very low carbohydrate, animal protein heavy diet, is perfectly acceptable and healthy for your heart, right? And this is always the shocking thing for
Shocking.
people to hear. I'm a heart surgeon telling you that you can eat all of the red meat that you want. And in fact, the way that I got the healthiest in my life was eating essentially all red meat, right? Eating a carnivore diet, animal proteins, some eggs, some seafood. And not only is that not damaging to your heart, it is actually the heart healthy diet. This is where the
Crazy.
American Heart Association stamp of approval should be.
It's so
But
crazy.
again, because of the system that we have, it's not. And so that's what I want people to understand. Eat real food is the first rule. Eat as much animal protein as you want. Eat some of the veggies if you want. They're not essential. Something else that is always shocking for people to hear, fruit, vegetables, they don't provide any unique nutrients that are not available in animal products. So you can get all of the nutrients that we need to exist as human beings from animal products. You don't need to get them from plants. You can get them from plants if you want, and for a lot of people, plants won't be harmful, but it turns out that red meat is really the most nutrient dense, most bioavailable source of nutrients that human beings can eat.
But they talk about fiber being very important. That's where you have the vegetables, the salads. It's the fiber that helps your body process, remove, excrete, poop.
Yep.
There are different terms for getting the already metabolized products out of your system. I
Yeah.
know that when I eat salad, certain vegetables, my life is much simpler.
Yeah.
You know what I
So,
mean?
fiber, again, it turns out is not essential for
Right.
our health. Fiber is good if it's taking the place in the diet of something else,
That's
like
not good.
processed
Correct. I
food.
get it. I
Right.
got it.
And so, this whole concept, right, when you really dig into the science behind eat, 5 to 7 servings of vegetables a day to get your fiber, what you
It's
see is
nonsense.
it's good if those 5 to 7 servings are substituting for highly processed food. But
Correct.
it turns out that if you're eating, a lot of red meat and your body is able to use the nutrients from that, right? There isn't a lot of waste product. And so you don't need the fiber to, kind of keep things moving along as we've been told. So again, it's not that fiber from vegetables is bad. It's just that it may not be necessary.
I get that 100%. Some of the athletes that I follow and that I speak to now, high end athletes, they're eating one meal a day
Yep.
now, basically fasting most of the day, and they're basically eating red meat, lamb chops, steak, stuff like that,
Yep.
chickens. That's what they're eating. Some vegetable, maybe some salad, but that one meal a day. And these are the strongest, most fit, healthiest men that exist today. These are warriors, guys that go in the cage and fight MMA stuff, etc. World class, champions. And that's how they're eating. They're trained. Their bodies are so efficient. And the less you eat, the more you fast, the more energy your body has to heal. Rather than 90% of all energy in the body is used for digestion. Think about that meal when you eat so much, you're so full you can't even move. You're almost like sick. Your body can't do anything but process food, process what you eat. You know what I'm saying? So I've learned the less I eat, the more time my body has to heal. This intermittent fasting, I think, is brilliant, and it seems to work.
Yeah, fasting is a great tool for people to incorporate as well. When we look at, again, what's driving this epidemic of metabolic disease, it's what we eat and it's how often we eat. Again, the shocking sort of statistic out there is the average American adult consumes calories 8 to 10 times a day. Now think about this. You're asleep for 8 hours, right?
Correct.
So you're awake for 16 hours. That means that they're eating or drinking calories, which is another big
Correct.
problem that we see, every 1 to 2 hours. You never give your body a chance to recover.
Correct.
And like you said, that's what can be so powerful about fasting. And I see it every day in the not only the athletes, but just the regular people that I work with, right? The business owners, the entrepreneurs.
Correct.
And, they may not be looking necessarily they may not be as focused on the physical, peak athletic performance, but their mental performance, right? If you're a business owner, your mental clarity, your sharpness is what's most important to you. And there are huge improvements that people see when they get off the junk food, they get off the processed food, and their brain is now getting the fuel that it's looking for, right? And it is able to function more efficiently in the same way that the athlete sees it in the way that their bodies are physically performing.
Brain fog is a real thing, and it's largely caused by what we consume, what we put in our body. And like for instance, in order to podcast with you, a podcast, let's say, starts at noon. I get up, I have some coffee, almost black coffee, and I have one natural yogurt, unflavored, Greek yogurt with some. I put in some organic honey, and I'm able to perform at a high level. When I do eat, I notice a big lag in my ability to concentrate, to think, to process, to respond, etc. And this is like a little sort of formula that I've come up with for me. The yogurt seems to be good for my stomach because I have stomach issues. Because for many years I didn't eat properly. I was raised, and my parents did the best they could do with the information they had, which was corrupt. And that's the next question. We dovetail into this. I mean, do you believe that the food industry is knowingly creating addictive, disease-causing products and getting away with it, by the way? Do you
Yeah,
believe that? I do.
definitely so. And it's not even a matter of belief, right? We have the evidence, we
We
have the
have the evidence.
paper trail. We know, and listen, you can, I look at it and say, that's what the food industry is supposed to do, right? The food industry is focused on selling you more food. They're like any other business.
Right.
And so, how do you do that, right? You create food. I like to, a friend of mine developed the term near food objects, right? That's what most of the stuff in the supermarket
That's
actually
great.
is.
That's
But,
great.
you create this stuff that people eat, and ultimately, because it's not nutrient dense, because um, you know, a lot of it gets fortified with vitamins, and it will have all this stuff. And you look at the label, and it will say, all these vitamins that are in it. But these vitamins are in forms that our bodies can't absorb. So it's not bioavailable. It's not nutrient dense, and it keeps us hungry. You go back to the old slogan, right? You bet you can't eat just one. And they
Right.
knew that you can't eat just one.
Correct.
And they manufacture and engineer this food so that it will be more addictive, and you will be more hungry, and you will buy more of the food ultimately. And that's their goal. I don't blame the food industry. The food industry, the concept that the food industry was there to keep us healthy is foolhardy in the first place. Like, why
Correct.
would the food industry care about our health?
It's
And
untrue. I get
so,
it.
again, this comes back to the individual personal responsibility of realizing that, and then, going a different way. Stay out of those aisles. Don't buy that food, and stick to the healthy stuff, right? The meat, the vegetables. I always tell people the outer perimeter of the grocery store is where you want to stay, and avoid all that stuff in the middle that, quite frankly, isn't food. It's these near food objects.
Interesting. That's wisdom. I love that. So they're knowingly doing it. It's their business. Just like R.J. Reynolds and Philip Morris did for years and years with cigarettes.
Yep.
They created an addictive product knowingly because that's their business.
And what people don't realize is that the tobacco industry, they took the techniques that the sugar industry had developed. Like I said, going back to the
Interesting.
1940s, 1950s, when the focus largely was on sugar as, a driver of heart disease, and the sugar industry was able to successfully manipulate that marketing, that messaging towards fat. And then the tobacco industry came along and said, we need to do that same thing. They took a lot of the same scientists, the marketing techniques, all of that came from the sugar industry initially, and then, got borrowed and successfully implemented by the tobacco industry. Now, again, what gives me some hope is that we were able to undo all that
Correct.
stuff, right? We
A
were able
lot
to
of it.
change that messaging around smoking and make people realize that it's unhealthy. And I think we're entering the era where we're going to see that same thing start to happen around the food.
How bad is smoking?
You
I mean,
know,
you're a heart
smoking,
surgeon. You're a heart
yeah,
surgeon. How bad is smoking?
smoking is bad, but I still would put forth that the food that we're
Is
eating
worse.
is worse,
I
and
agree.
especially today, right? I think most people realize smoking is bad. Now, smoking is addictive, right? And there are still people that do it. But that part of the problem we've made a lot of headway against. What people don't realize is that same thing, right? Sugar is addictive. Sugar
Right.
has a lot of these same negative health outcomes associated with it, and yet it's commonly accepted in society, right? And what really is sort of sad to me is, no one's going to hand a infant or a toddler a pack of
Correct.
cigarettes, right?
But they're giving
But
them
we
candy,
give them,
candy, candy,
yep,
candy.
sugar all the time, and
So
they
terrible.
literally get hooked from birth these days, and
I'm in
that's
Boca.
another issue we need to address.
I'm in Boca Raton, and went to dinner the other night in a place called Meisner Park. It's a beautiful area with just shops and stores and restaurants, a park, social place, and there's a big candy store, ice cream shop. And it's this summer. It's very, very warm. There's a line out the door, down the block, and it's little parents with little kids. And I used to be on that line when my daughters were little. And we would go to Meisner Park to kill some time. Maybe we see a movie, go to dinner, and then we take a walk, and we get online at the ice cream store, which is the candy store, and feed our kids sugar. But so it's almost like an American tradition. We've been sort of trained that way. But one of the things that's really interesting that I want to bring up is that we use the word sugar. So people I know, some of them are very successful people, smart people. They know sugar's bad. They don't eat candy. They don't eat sweets. But they eat carbohydrates. They eat carbohydrates, and they don't realize. They don't realize drinking alcohol. Pure sugar, correct?
Depends on the alcohol, but yeah, alcohol is going to have its own issues associated with it.
Let's talk about
And
alcohol for a minute. Tell us
yeah.
about alcohol, the heart, everything else.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because you sometimes hear that alcohol, especially red wine, right, is good for the heart. It's got
The tannins are very good for
yeah,
the
these
heart. Yeah.
anti-inflammatory,
Right.
antioxidants, right? And people talk about the benefits. The reality is that alcohol is not beneficial to our health in any way. There may be a level of alcohol consumption that isn't going to do harm to you, isn't
Right.
going to do significant harm at least. But ultimately, alcohol is not beneficial to our health. And the answer is the less alcohol you consume, the better. Now, like everything else, right? There are alcohols that are going to be higher in sugar. Um, a lot of it, some of it's going to come from the alcohol itself. Some of it's going to come from the mixers, right, that we put
Right.
with the alcohol.
Right.
And then some of it's going to come from when we drink alcohol, we tend to make worse choices about what we're eating with it, right? So it's very complex. But ultimately, when I'm working with patients, I tell them, you may make the intentional choice every once in a while to have some alcohol, understanding that it's not beneficial for your health. And I'm okay with that. In the same way that you may make the intentional choice every once in a while to have some ice cream with your kids, or,
Right.
have the birthday cake, whatever it is. I don't think we need to be perfect and Puritans about all of this, but I want people to make intentional choices instead of the unintentional way that we approach what we eat and how we drink and all of that as we go through our lives today. So many of us, eat just because that's what's around us, right? That's what's convenient. We're told, right, you need to eat 3 times a day. And so we're just grabbing, whatever is convenient for us. And it's a very unintentional way that we approach our food and our lives in general. And I want people to be more intentional about it. I want people
I
to
love
think
that.
about, what is this doing for my health? And like I said, sometimes you're going to make the choice that you're going to enjoy something that is not good for your health. And as long as that's occasional and intentional, I'm okay with it.
Now, since I have you here, I just, I have to ask you this question. What's your position on bacon?
I think bacon is a healthy animal product,
I love
right?
it.
It
I'm going to go buy
comes,
some bacon. I'm so excited right now.
yeah,
Thank you.
yeah, yeah. Eat the bacon. It never was what was causing the trouble with your heart.
I get it. What about bread? Most breads are
Bread,
not good.
no, bread is not good, and again, there is a big difference, I'll admit, between, let's say, a homemade sourdough bread, right, and the bread that you're going to get in the
White
supermarket
bread,
for the
yeah.
most part, or the bread
Looks
that you're going to get at the fast food place. But all of it is carbohydrates, right? And as we said earlier,
sugar.
if you're starting from a place where you are metabolically unhealthy, and most of us are, the carbohydrates in any form are going to be problematic. If you get yourself to the point that you are metabolically healthy, you're one of that 12%, right? And
Right.
everything's working as it should. And again, you make a intentional choice every once in a while to have the good quality homemade sourdough bread or something along those lines. Great. It's going to be, minimally harmful or not harmful at all for you. But for most people, the answer is you should be cutting out bread because it is just a highly processed carbohydrate.
All right. Now let's just talk about you. You are in the trenches of modern medicine. You're 280 pounds, 5'7", unhealthy, right? You're basically cutting people open, right? Do open
Yep.
heart surgeries and that kind of thing. That's crazy, right? Where they crack the sternum.
Yep.
Did you have like some sort of white light moment at some point when you were actually operating that said, "Hey, this is crazy what you were seeing and understanding cholesterol in your own way"? Tell us just about that. Was there a moment? There must have been some moment where you made a decision, and was it because of your experience, like in the OR, looking at the disease in people's hearts, etc.? That
You
white
know,
light moment.
yeah, it really was more of a personal issue for me, right? I had young children that I wanted to be, alive
Wow,
for,
I
and I
love
wanted
that.
to be there for, right? And I had my wife that I wanted to be there for. And I realized that if I continued down this path, right, and I end up like my patients, I wasn't going to be able to do that. And so that really was the initial motivating factor for me. Now, along the way, there were a lot of, I would say, pivotal moments in my life. And one of them is actually the opening chapter of my book, where I talk about a unfortunate young woman, a young mother who ended up on my operating table with a devastating cardiac condition, and we couldn't save her, right? Despite all the, many, many hours of intense work by my team and I, we couldn't save her. And those children were going to, now grew up without their mother.
It's terrible.
And that was really one of those moments that I said, what are we doing here? Because again, her condition, her ending up on my operating table was entirely preventable. There were so many warning signs along the way, so many opportunities for physicians and the healthcare system to intervene so it didn't end up at that point that she ended up on my operating table and dying on my operating table. And, there are many other things like that that just continue to fuel this fire now of changing our course, changing our health so that I don't need to continue to be as busy as I am as a heart surgeon.
That just triggered something in me because, as you know, my father died in a hospital of a massive heart attack in 1973. They were just beginning to talk about cholesterol, blood pressure, all these different things, and entirely preventable, in my opinion. What's it like when you lose a patient in the OR?
Yeah,
What's that like?
it's certainly the worst thing I need to do. And, I would say it's even worse today, right? Because I do realize this. I do realize that they shouldn't have been there in the first
First
place.
place.
It was preventable. Back before I was awoken to all of this, right? And I was
Right.
just sort of a heart surgeon, right? And you would say, we tried our best, and unfortunately, their condition just wasn't salvageable. And that is hard, right? I don't. That has always been difficult,
I
but
can't even.
today it's probably even more difficult for me because I realize all of the missed opportunities that patients like that have in their life. And my goal now is to get to people earlier so that they don't have to end up on the operating table, don't have to end up dying of heart attacks in the hospital.
So you've seen this all firsthand. I can't imagine walking out of an OR and facing a young family and saying that mom or dad has passed. I was a stockbroker, and so the pain I had was telling a guy we were wrong. A stock went down, he lost his money. It's different than telling a young family they lost their mom or their dad or their child. But so you've seen firsthand all of these things. What I'm questioning is you have certain patients that come to you and they feel fine, but you see that they have late stage heart disease. How do you handle something like that? How do you convince me, who just had a bad score on a CT test and got to go see the cardiologist, how do you convince me that this is preventable, what I got to do, etc.?
This is another area where we need to do a much better job in medicine, right? The early detection. And, the scan that you got is a perfect example, right? It's called a coronary artery calcium
Right.
scan. It is a simple, non-invasive test. You can attest, right? You lay
Right.
down in the scanner, takes about 5, maybe 10 minutes.
Correct.
They don't even have to put an IV in you. And in most situations, it's going to cost around $100 to
I
get
paid
that test.
$100, not covered by insurance, by the way, which I
Yep,
found
not
very
covered by
interesting.
insurance, but $100. You get this scan done, and it shows you heart disease at its earliest
Oh
stages.
boy, I'm in trouble.
And it is a very underutilized test. Most people have never heard of the test, haven't had the test done. Most doctors, honestly, aren't familiar with it. There's this perception because insurance doesn't cover it, it must not be worth doing. But nothing could be further from the truth. So it's one of the things that I really advocate for people to get. Let's find out about the disease early before you end up with the heart attack or before you're seeing me as a heart surgeon. We can see what's going on and then we can start to make the changes. And just seeing the disease, right? Me being able to show you that picture of this is the disease in your arteries, that can be very powerful. Now, the secondary problem that comes up is that for most, when you take that information to most cardiologists, they're going to give you lousy advice about how to stop it from getting worse. They're going to talk to you about all the things that we talked about today, right? The low fat diet and taking the statin and all of that. And that doesn't do a very good job of really preventing this. But at least it's a first step. We have the information, we're aware of the problem. And now hopefully you start to come across more information, right? Like I'm talking about, like Dr. Atkins was talking about back in the 70s, on what we should and can do to really stop the progression of this disease.
You advocate for CGMs, blood markers, and food as
Yep.
medicine. We've gotten to that. How do we help people take those first steps? Do you understand what I mean? It's got to
Yeah.
be it's overwhelming without overwhelming people. How do you handle that?
Yeah. So, really, for me, it starts with giving people hope. One of the other real, insidious and real sad things that has happened is people don't even believe that it's possible to be healthy anymore, right? They look all around them and everyone is sick, right? We gave the statistics.
Unbelievable.
Everyone is on medications. And so this is now felt to be normal. It's accepted as normal. And people don't even know and don't even believe that it's possible to exist in a different way, right? And so that really is where I start with people. I start by spreading this message of hope that we can prevent heart disease. We can keep you off the operating table. We can reverse diabetes, right?
Wow. Yep.
You get 100 doctors in the room, right? And you ask them, is type 2 diabetes, right? The more common form of diabetes that people have, is that a reversible condition? And my guess is that 95 to 99 of them are going to say, no, it is not,
Wow.
because they've never seen it. I didn't realize this either, right? Until I saw it, right? Until I came across the work of Dr. Atkins and so many others. And I learned that, yes, type 2 diabetes is a completely reversible condition. And now in my practice that I work with patients, I see it every day. And yet, most people and most doctors don't realize this. And we need to get people back to a back to the core belief that they can be healthy and they should be healthy, and they shouldn't accept a lifetime of medications and a lifetime of worsening disease. So really my message starts with hope, giving people hope, making them aware that they can be healthy, they can do better, and then we can start laying out the steps on how to do that.
I love that. Thank you for that. That's great. Now, looking back, what would you say to your younger self just coming into medical school? Before all the surgeries, before the book, before the speaking engagements, etc. What would you say to your younger self?
Yeah, what I really would go back and tell myself is be more curious, right? Question some of these things that you've been taught, you're going to be taught, right, as fact. Question, are they really true? Is there a different perspective on these things? And that's ultimately what's been most important in my journey, is getting more curious, asking more of these questions, like the question, that you started the podcast off with. Why are there so many sick people?
Okay, that's so great. Now, tell us, just to repeat what you just said. We spoke a little bit before we turned the cameras on, and you have a very unique practice, one that I was shocked by. So share that with the audience before we say goodbye. I want you to explain how you do business today, and how people can find you, reach you, get in touch, etc.
Yeah, so I have a nationwide telemedicine only practice, right? So I see
Wow.
people via telemedicine throughout the United States, even internationally, and we keep people off the operating table. That's the goal. We help people recover, reverse their diabetes, reverse things like high blood pressure, and stop their heart disease from progressing. And in some cases, we do get some reversal of heart disease. We see things like coronary calcium scores going down. That is possible. But as long as we stop it from getting worse, that really becomes the primary goal. So we work with patients, like I said, completely telemedicine, all 50 states. And you can find out more about that at ifixhearts.com. That's also where to follow me on all the social medias, ifixhearts, and come, see if the work that my team and I do might be helpful for you.
That's great. ifixhearts.com. You're on social media?
Yep.
Every platform?
Every platform, ifixhearts.
Even on Instagram, it's ifixhearts?
Even on
And your
Instagram.
name
Yep.
is Phillip Ovadia?
Ovadia. Yep.
Ovadia?
Correct. Yep. Look that up.
Telemedicine, a cardiologist, more than that, you're a surgeon, and I intend to be in touch with you very soon. Are there any closing remarks, anything else you want to share with the audience today?
No, I just want to thank you, Ross, for giving me this opportunity, for helping to spread this message. I know that you realize the importance of health
Oh,
in our life as general, right? Much of your audience is focused on business and wealth building, and you want to be able to enjoy that ultimately. And I always
correct.
tell people, health is wealth. right? If you're building wealth but you're ignoring your health, you're not going to be happy with how that ends up. So let's work on both together, and let's be able to enjoy the abundance that we are all creating in our lives by focusing on our health and then letting that spread. And I just thank you for giving me the opportunity to spread this message to the people that need to hear it.
And I thank you. I heard it said, we'll close with this. You can have 100 issues going on in your life, but when you have a serious health issue, you only have one issue.
Yep.
Thank you so much, Doc. I really appreciate your time today. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.